Good evening, my lit and film family. Tonight we're going to be talking about Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep for a little while. Um, and I'll get to it in just a minute, but there's a couple of points of housekeeping that I have to make. The first is about your final. I will be emailing you with respect to your final. As of right now, it is scheduled for the 18th of May from 3:30 to 5:30. But there will be more information about that coming out shortly, which leads me to my second point of housekeeping, which is papers. I have been receiving a few papers, but not nearly as many as are outstanding. So there needs to be more that come in. Um, I can't grade you fairly unless you do your work. So get your papers in as soon as possible. Which leads me to the next point, which is the film pairing with The Big Sleep. It's the movie I want you to watch is an obscure Albanian film by the title of The Big Lebowski. Some of you may have already seen this film. Some of you may not have seen the film, but again, it's called The Big Lebowski. I'll include the information. It's widely available on streaming services. Um, so it shouldn't be hard for you to find. But yeah, so that's your finals, your papers, the movie, and then the next thing is I know that a lot of you in this class are graduating this year. That's almost always the case with this class, this level of classes. It's sort of a last requirement that people leave to the end of their undergraduate academic careers. But if you are sticking around and if you are still going to be an undergraduate next semester, please, please sign up for my tragedy class, CLAS 3220. I don't like plugging, or I certainly don't like begging, but if I don't reach a number in that class, it's going to be cut, and that will suck for me. So, if you want things to suck for me, go ahead, don't sign up for it. And then the last point of housekeeping I have here is that the videos, because I am no good at the internets, I managed to set up two different YouTube channels and sort of indiscriminately uploaded them, not just this class, but other classes too, between the two channels. So I'm migrating all of those videos over to the Professor Pletcher channel. So if you log on and you don't see one of the videos, Androids or Clockwork Orange, if they're gone, they're not gone. They've just been relocated to another channel on YouTube. So all you have to do is search for Professor Pletcher and it'll come up for you. They'll have different URLs, so your old URLs won't work anymore. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's that for that. So with that, being done with that, having done that, that being that, let's talk about The Big Sleep. Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Where to begin? Now, Chandler he's not a native. He's not a Native American. I was almost going to say, obviously, he's not that, but he is not. He was not an American citizen born. He's English by birth. and emigrated to America. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds with Chandler's personal story. He married a woman who was had lots of family money, and B was significantly older than he was when he married her. And that sounds cynical, although I have not seen any um, evidence to suggest that Chandler married her for anything but love. So, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. Who knows? Um, Big Sleep, published in 1939. So when we think about the sort of social historical perspective, um, we're again headed back into sort of um, uh, we're headed yeah, okay, all right, I'll come back to that because I have to choose my words carefully here at any rate. But it's not so different from the social circumstances that we talked about when we talked about with Thompson. Though Thompson is writing pre-war and Chandler is writing, or sorry, Thompson is writing post-war, Chandler is writing pre-war, the war being World War II. Um, the same ideas, the same concepts of America and Americanism still apply. Remember, in by 39-40, we're coming out of the Great Depression. Um, we've proven ourselves to be great as America, and so the same sorts of social standards still apply. Those standards of respectability and of accountability and what it means to be a man. They're there here too. So Chandler is he's writing again what we would call hard-boiled fiction. Okay, so this is just a sort of another way. We talked about pulp fiction with Thompson. The notion of hard-boiled fiction is much in the same vein, um, in the sense that it deals with social realities that might not be topics of polite conversation on a day-to-day basis. It's tough talking dames, and the gumshoe, the detective, um, who can muscle his way out of things when necessary, um, but also is always armed with a wisecrack or a good quip. So yeah, hard boiled fiction. We're dealing with here, and this comes out in the dialogue. Probably the best examples of this are Philip Marlowe, who what is the main character in all of Chandler's novels, and in I think most of his short stories, if not all of his short stories. Um, but so between Marlowe, who's this, uh, he's a former cop who is now a private investigator, and he knows all the tricks and can deal with the criminals just as well as he can deal with the cops. In fact, probably deals better with the criminals than he does with the cops in many instances. Um, in most instances, I should say. So he's the terse, cynical, seen it all kind of. Well, let me put it this way: Humphrey Bogart played Philip Marlowe in some of the film adaptations. So, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Not Humphrey Bogart per se, but anyway. Um, uh, but so the conversation between him and the Sternwood sister Vivian, the older Sternwood sister Vivian, the dialogue between those two is uh, uh, a pretty good example, if not the best example, but one of the best examples of hard boiled dialogue, right? So you don't really give an inch in your conversation, and yeah, okay. So let me go back to just the question of genre real quickly here. Again, we're dealing with we will later know as noir fiction, or hard boiled crime, or pulp fiction. There are many names that are used to describe this particular genre, but it's basically crime fiction from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, usually featuring a jaded lead character, um, who is sometimes solving a crime, but is sometimes committing the crime. Depends on what book you're looking at. Um, but it's they're dealing with this part of American, the part of the American reality that isn't the white picket fence, that isn't the two kids and the dog and the two cars at home. Uh, Chandler, of course, being an LA resident, was very fond of LA, and so most of his books are set in and around LA, which is a place that, if you don't know, is kind of seedy. I know we can associate Hollywood with glamour, and we think of movie stars as being wealthy and that, but there's a lot of dirty stuff that goes down in LA. And that was one of the things that Chandler was very interested in. So we have a first person um, narrative, first person limited narrative. So we're in basically it's Marlowe who narrates, is our narrator, um, and so by nature, of course, he's limited because he can't know what other people are thinking because he's just a person. Um, and so it's focalized through his vision, through Marlowe's rather jaded vision. Um, what else did I want to talk about here? Okay, so I'm just gonna stick to some motifs here, um, so that this doesn't go on too long for you. Um, One of the main motifs in the novel has to do with chivalry, in particular, the objective correlative of the knight. When Marlowe first walks into the Sternwood mansion, he sees a stained glass window, and it depicts a knight just about to save a damsel in distress. Just about to, right? So it is hinting at the idea of chivalry, but it's unaccomplished, it's unfulfilled. And then shortly thereafter, as soon as he looks at that stained glass window, then enter Carmen Sternwood, who's the younger sister. I'll come back to the sisters in a moment. But they and she swoons into his arms, obviously using seduction as a tactic for manipulation. Um, okay, so maybe yeah. So now this is a good time to talk about the way that another objective correlative that Chandler uses in this. Wait, let me wrap up with the knight first. So it's not just the stained glass window. It's also the fact that Marlowe likes to solve chess problems, um, to relax in his off time. And there's one scene that comes later in the book where he realizes that the position that he's put his knight in is an untenable position in terms of the strategy of the game of chess. So all of this speaks to Marlowe's the character of Marlowe, is kind of like intentions towards chivalry, but ultimate inability to kind of fully live up to the codes of the knight and of chivalry. So if you don't know, chivalry is um, code of behavior that dates basically to the medieval period in European history. Has to do with knights and doing the right Christian thing at all times, and above all, treating women with, I hesitate to use the word respect. Um, it's more like a fearful admiration. I guess I don't know. Maybe respect is the right word. You can read up on chivalry, and it would be good for you if you did. So you have the objective correlative of the knight and chivalry, and Marlowe's ultimate failure to be able to be like that knight. Um, but then you also have the female characters in the book, and there are three. There are three primary ones. There's a fourth one. I'm not going to talk about her. Um, that's the girlfriend who steals the pornographic pictures. Um, I'm going to leave her out of this discussion for now, but I'm just going to focus on the three main female characters here. There is Carmen. So you have General Sternwood, who is this old general who's in a wheelchair and dying a slow death of some incurable disease. And he's got two daughters. One is called Vivian. Vivian was married to a guy called Regan, who has disappeared. No one knows what's happened to him yet. Then there's Carmen. She's the younger sister. So Vivian is. I'll take them one at a time. Okay, so instead of trying to cover all three of them at once, let me do one at a time. Let me start with Carmen, the younger sister. Carmen, the younger sister, is clearly portrayed as either dumb or always playing dumb, one or the other. And she's also the one who uses her physical attractions to manipulate the men around her. And so, what is the objective correlative here? It's hair color. What color is Carmen's hair? I don't know. What color is stereotypically women's hair who are not very bright, but use their sexuality to manipulate people around them? She's a blonde, naturally. And so then you get Vivian, the older sister, who is clearly more intelligent. She can keep up with Marlowe in conversation, and in a couple of instances, sort of outpace him intellectually. And so, what color is her hair? Her hair is brown. She's a brunette. So she's cunning and intelligent. So the blonde is dumb and simple. The brunette is cunning and intelligent. It's not the most nuanced of of symbolism necessarily. And then you have the third woman, the mystery woman, Mona, silver wig. Right? So she's got silver hair, but it's a wig, so like you can't really tell. You don't really know. Like there's this air of mystery about her. And she's kidnapped, but then she's also involved in Marlowe finally escaping from the clutches of the gangsters towards the end of the movie. So those are pretty clear objective correlatives in terms of the thematics of the book itself. Okay. So then we talk about General Sternwood in the opening parts of the work, and then again later on in the work. Whenever Marlowe goes to see General Sternwood, he has to stay in his greenhouse, right? Because whatever his physical condition is, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's mentioned in the text, and I just can't remember. It's possible. So he has to be in this hot, humid environment. So he stays in his greenhouse, and in the greenhouse he grows these orchids. But he hates the smell of them because he says they smell like death. So an orchid is a beautiful flower. I personally don't mind the smell of orchids. But what General Sternwood says is that they smell of rotting flesh. which I guess probably could be the case if you have so many of them in an enclosed space. Could be overpowered, I guess. Um, but the point of the orchid is that it's a vibrant flower. It's a beautiful flower, but it's also a decadent flower, right? Um, yeah. And for General Sternwood, the beauty of it, the color of it, is reminiscent of life and of health and of vibrancy. But on the other hand, there's this underlying baseline of death and decay. So if you just look at the surface of it, you think, oh, that's a beautiful flower. But then you spend enough time with it, and then you come to understand that it's not really beautiful. It's a indicator of death and of decay, right? And that's what General Sternwood kind of stands in for. There's the weather in the novel. I don't know if you noticed, but it rains an awful lot, which seems weird for LA because if I am to believe all of the pop songs I have ever heard in my life, it never rains in sunny Southern California. But it's raining in the Big Sleep. So again, this kind of like this sort of like depressing. And if you watch any film noir at all, like so, I said I want you to watch The Big Lebowski and write about The Big Lebowski. That's actually a very sunny, sunshiny movie. Um, but if you go back and you look at uh, the actual film noir from the 40s and 50s, it's raining all the time. Like for example, if you watch Blade Runner, right, the director's cut, that's the one I want you to watch. You will notice that although that is technically set in San Francisco, although in the book, no, in the movie, it's kind of this mixture between L.A. and San Francisco. Anyway, but it's raining all the time in there, and that's a noir motif, right? Because noir is about the oppressive forces that work on you outside of your control. I mean, you have no control. You can't pray them away. Your faith isn't going to make them go away. Your optimism isn't going to make them go away. Life circumstances are going to continue to press down on you. So this brings us back to what we talked about with existentialism. Um, the idea that you suddenly come to the realization that there isn't any meaning. There is no meaning to existence in the context of the larger universe, right? And so you're confronted with this idea of absurdity. That not only can you not make sense of the context or the contours of your own existence, but in actual fact, there is no sense to be made anyway, right? So we have two choices in existentialism. I'm sorry, I'm oversimplifying here, but there are essentially two basic choices here. You can either choose to say that there's no meaning to anything, so nothing matters. That's nihilism. Nothing means anything, so nothing matters. It doesn't matter what I do, what I think, how I treat other people. That's nihilism. Okay. And then on the other hand, you have, and I mean, I'm not an existentialist as such per se, but like I do love the writings of Camus, and the conclusion that Camus comes to is that it is in fact the meaning of life. There is no meaning of life as such, right? There is no ultimate purpose. But therefore, what that means is that we construct our own meanings, and that so living our lives is the meaning of life. And that's the way that I would choose to go, especially with respect to the way that we treat each other. Okay, talked about the orchids, talked about weather. There's architecture and design. Remember, so now we're gonna get deeper, a little bit deeper here into the weeds. There is, of course, a as there will be, as is, I shouldn't say will be, but as is appropriate to a novel set in L.A., a developing contrast between what is real and what only seems to be real, right? But the thing that seems to be real is indistinguishable from the thing that is actually real. So, it's as basic as the pictures that are taken of Carmen that are then used to blackmail General Sternwood. That's a gap between what is fake and what is real. I already mentioned the stained glass window in the Sternwood mansion. It's fake, but it's real in the sense that it conveys a meaning with it itself. Um, there are when Marlowe goes to the casino, there's fake doors in the wall, so what appears to be a wall has a fake door in it. Then there's the DA, Wilde. Um, this happens about halfway through the novel, where they're trying to figure out how this body ended up in the ocean, which is a crime that never gets solved, by the way. That's called a MacGuffin. I'll come back to that in just a second. Um, so Wilde comes from this old LA family who had this house downtown but wanted to move to the suburbs. And so what they did is they just took apart their downtown house and reconstructed it out in the suburbs, right? So, so here's this piece of old LA, but it's not where it's supposed to be. So it's real, but it's also fake at the same time. So it looks like it used to look, but it's in the wrong place now. It's not the real thing, but it is the real thing, but it's not the real thing because it's not in the right place. Um, so this speaks to the kind of fake real uh, um, conversation that underlies the Big Sleep. I wouldn't say it's the main theme in the Big Sleep, but it is underlying the whole thing. So, which brings me back to the idea of the MacGuffin. The MacGuffin. I think it's Mac. It might just be Mick MC. But the MacGuffin is a literary slash cinematic trope that it was named after a character in an Alfred Hitchcock movie that featured a doctor that one of the characters was trying to see all the time. But every time he went to the doctor's office, the doctor's name was McGuff. So every time he went to the doctor's office, it said McGuff, and then this is a long time ago, but like they used to have a little slidey thing on your office door that said in or out, right? So every time the guy went to the doctor's office, it said McGuff out, McGuff out, McGuff out, until the very last scene of the movie when he shows up and it says McGuff in, and so that's what we call the MacGuffin. So what is a MacGuffin? A MacGuffin is a plot device that's introduced that helps to move the story along, but is not resolved by the end of the plot. So it's just something that's there to just get the ball rolling and to get the characters interacting with one another, and to get the story moving along, but isn't itself the central part of the story. So we have the MacGuffin, of course, in The Big Sleep is the body of the driver and the murder of the driver that's never accounted for. For a long part of the story, Rusty Regan, is the MacGuffin because no one knows where he went. And as Marlowe consistently reminds himself, he wasn't hired to find Regan. He was only hired to end this blackmail plot involving Carmen and these pornographic photographs that were taken of her when she was in a state of chemical imbalance. Although at the end we do find out, so Regan's not really a MacGuffin because we do find out at the end of the story that Carmen killed him. She killed him and dumped his body at the bottom of an oil well, disused oil well, because the Sternwood property sits above the Sternwood oil fields. And yeah, that's a whole thing in and of itself. So you've got this like opulent mansion, and then you've got this like smelly, filthy industrial thing attached to the same property. So again, contrast between high and low, and yeah, right, between fake and real for that matter. I already talked about the knight on the chessboard. Let's see what else. Talked about existentialism and nihilism. What did it, as Marlowe muses to himself, what does it matter? What does it matter where you are once you're dead? You're sleeping the big sleep. All right. It's pretty nothingness. Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, I think that's about it for tonight. I don't think there's anything else that I can tell you that you can't pick up from the cues I've given you here. I hope you enjoyed reading Chandler. I certainly do. Oh, well, there's one last thing I want to talk about, and this is going to take us back to the very beginning of the lecture. If you like Chandler, if you didn't like Chandler, just turn the video off now. But if you like Chandler, there are really four great novelists, four great American crime novelists. There's more than four great novelists, obviously. There's more than four great crime novelists, but there are four really great American crime novelists from the 20s to the 60s. I'll do them in chronological order. There's Dashiell Hammett. He wrote, probably his most famous work is The Maltese Falcon, which was a movie starring Humphrey Bogart. It's fantastic, but he also wrote some other things that delved into some Depression era and labor movement issues. So totally worth reading. Dashiell Hammett. There is my personal favorite. His name is James M. Cain. You might know James M. Cain from Double Indemnity, which was made into an HBO series not very long ago. 3, 4, 5 years ago. I can't remember now. He also wrote The Postman Always Rings Twice. The Postman Always Rings Twice. Made into a movie, not once but twice. That's how good that book is, and it is really good. James M. Cain is with Thompson, the darkest of them. Chandler, we've already discussed Chandler. I think 7 total novels. They're all good. Yeah. And then there is, of course, Jim Thompson, who has way more than 7 novels. So if you enjoyed this kind of fiction, this kind of writing, Hammett, Cain, C-A-I-N, Hammett is H-A-M-M-E-T-T, Dashiell, D-A-S-H-I-E-L-L, Dashiell Hammett, James M. Cain, Raymond Chandler, and Jim Thompson. And what is, I think, what's remarkable about the four of these writers is that they come from remarkably different social backgrounds. Uh, okay, yeah, they're all white, but I mean, like in terms of the social economic circumstances that they came through, are all pretty remarkably different. So if you enjoy Chandler, read more Chandler. Check out Kane. Check out Hammett, and read more Thompson. Okay. And I will be talking to you again via video and via email very soon, very shortly. Keep those papers coming. You know, yeah, keep those papers coming. Okay, so be good and bye.